Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the conference at the National Bank of Poland, Narodowy Bank Polski. Today we are going to witness the press conference of the Management Board, Marta Kajtli, Deputy Governor of the National Bank of Poland, Adam Lipiński, Deputy Governor of the NBP, Rafał Sura, Paweł Szałamacha and Piotr Pogonowski, members of the Management Board of the National Bank of Poland. Ladies and gentlemen, today's topic is related to the narrative that is spread in the media outlets of political nature. And the Management Board of the NBP addressed Szymon Hołownia, the Speaker of the Sejm. Marta Kajtli, over to you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are meeting today to discuss the address of the Management Board of the National Bank of Poland to Szymon Hołownia, the Marshal of the Sejm of the Republic of Poland, and we refer to allegations voiced by the parliamentary members, some of the parliamentary members. And some of the MPs use two major arguments as regards fighting inflation and assets purchase. And there are certain allegations expressed, and in our address we try to focus on the major arguments. I'm going to focus on inflation, and Mr. Szałamacha and Sura will discuss other issues related to legal aspects of the case under discussion. So allegations against the National Bank of Poland in terms of fighting inflation, as if the NBP was politicized in these actions. We have to emphasize that high inflation in several recent years is typical for Eastern and Central Europe, as well as Western Europe and the Western world, as a result of the pandemic and the war of Russia against Ukraine. These are major drivers of inflation. Actions undertaken by the National Bank of Poland were extremely precise, and we were one of the first central banks to start fighting inflation back in 2021. And we have been extremely successful in this fight against inflation. Highest levels of inflation, 18.4. Currently, it's 6.5%, and we are about to reach the inflation target in 2025. Taking into account the fact that it is mainly related to supply, not only Polish economy, but the world economy, the global economy has undergone certain problems, and we believe that we are going to reach the inflation target in this time perspective. When we started raising in 2021 the rates, we were at the forefront. We were one of the first central banks who undertook these actions. Thank you. Another allegation is related to the fact that the governor of the NBP and the entire management board are accused of purchase of assets during the COVID pandemic. Speaking of the pandemic, we had to react in 2020. There was a risk of a huge drop in the GDP, which could endanger stability of prices in our country. The National Bank of Poland, between spring 2020 until November 21, for 1 year and a half, we undertook certain actions. Spring, March 2020, just remember empty streets, the feeling of threat of danger of the coming decline, economic slowdown and decline. And the governor and I personally took part in this decision-making process. We had no doubts that non-standard extraordinary measures were necessary. These measures are fully in line, compliant with the Constitution of the Republic of Poland. Under the Constitution, the NBP has the right and obligation to develop monetary policy. We are the only institution in this country to make these decisions about the monetary policy. As regards monetary policy, the Act on the National Bank of Poland stipulates that the National Bank of Poland can sell or purchase bonds and securities for these purposes. Therefore, this allegation of our violations is groundless, fully groundless. Public opinion has raised certain opinions that the purchase of treasury bonds violates Article 220 of the Constitution that stipulates that the budget shall not provide for covering a budget deficit by way of contracting credit obligations to the state's central bank. This provision does not address the central bank, but the Council of Ministers and the majority in the parliament that adopts the budget. And speaking of the 1990s, the practice was, and the budget stipulated that a part of the deficit can be covered by the credit obligations to the central bank. If you believe that such a violation, this is a violation, you have to adopt the Constitution. Under the current version of the Constitution, we are not limited in terms of undertaking such measures. These operations, these measures are similar to other instruments adopted by other central banks in the world. The Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England have resorted to similar measures. The National Bank of Poland, 3/4 of these efforts in the first pandemic year, 2020, were implemented, and in autumn 21 we completed this action. Everything was done in line with the international standards. Monthly auctions were announced to the market on Reuters portal, Bloomberg portal. So marketplace were informed about that. We informed about the assets purchase, about the deadlines of settling transactions. So all banks who could and wished to participate in it, we accepted tenders that were most advantageous. Those least advantageous were rejected. These measures were positively assessed by the International Monetary Fund and were not criticized or undermined by the European Central Bank that monitors such efforts and measures implemented in the EU member states. Therefore, we believe that the allegation about the violation of the constitutions are groundless. This is an attempt to accuse the management board of the National Bank of Poland and the governor of the NBP of actions, and these actions were taken to save us during a very difficult period of time. Such accusations and allegations are unprecedented. Saving the country against the economic slump in these extraordinary conditions show that the National Bank of Poland actually fulfilled its obligations and met the economic interest of our country. It was courageous, and we didn't want to see the situation when dozens of years of achievements after 1989, after the transformation, would be in vain, would be wasted if we were part of the recession. Actions undertaken by the National Bank of Poland, which are attacked now, were decided using best practices of central banks and to the best of knowledge. If the NBP did not undertake these actions, it would have been against the interests of the economy of the state. Therefore, these attacks against the National Bank of Poland are politicized. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Yet another week, we have to resist pressure and attacks against the National Bank of Poland and the governor of the National Bank of Poland. Attacks, verbal attacks that are departed from the legal reality and have nothing to do with facts, with the factual reality. Let me remind you that the Polish Constitution and the Act on the National Bank of Poland guarantees top performance requirements and the independence of the National Bank of Poland. The Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union and the Statute of the National Bank of Poland strengthen these standards. In the past, when the governor of the National Bank was accused of violating these provisions, this is totally groundless. Madam Keitel and Mr. Szałamacha mentioned that this path towards inflation target takes time. It doesn't happen overnight between one quarter and another. This is a long durée process, and the same goes for the purchase of securities, of bonds. The management board of the NBP, when we speak of purchasing assets and when we speak about decision-making, and the management board of the National Bank of Poland decided in a collegiate manner. The governor was not making this decision by himself. It was a team decision-making process. Now, historical and legal context. The Act on the State Tribunal, speaking of the provision in particular Article 18, which is heavily quoted, it was adopted in 1982 on the 26th of March, after the martial law was introduced. The Act on the National Bank of Poland and the Constitution of the Republic of Poland date back to 1997, and they offer safeguards to the independence of the National Bank of Poland. Therefore, in the 18th, the Act on the State Tribunal, these provisions are not compliant with the Constitution of the Republic of Poland, and they have to be eliminated from the legal environment as something that has to belong to the history, which is not in line with the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union. Let me also emphasize that for 4 years, since 1982, and in particular in the 90s, non-parliamentary majority has ever came up with the idea to issue allegations based on the State Tribunal Act. non-majority elected in democratic elections has never used such allegations.
Also, the European Court of the European Union only once, in only one case, was deciding with respect to the governor of the Bank of Latvia, based on Article 14(2) on the state of the European Central Bank that the government's decisions were adjudicated. Why was that? Because over the years, governments and majorities in the parliaments have changed, but none of those majorities have come up with the idea of formulating such serious allegations against a national bank governor in office. It only happened in Latvia, but that was a strictly criminal allegation. And even though this was a criminal allegation, in Poland we only have political allegations in place, but nevertheless the Court of Justice of the European Union decided that this means was reaching too far, and the governor of the Bank of Latvia was restored. Ladies and gentlemen, those allegations that are formulated in public often refer to the fact that the governor of the National Bank of Poland does not remain independent. Let me remind you of Article 227.4, which states that the president or governor of the National Bank of Poland may not be a member of a political party, of a professional trade union, or any other organization which would not be in line with the dignity of his or her office. And I emphasize dignity. Ladies and gentlemen, please specify a specific deed that might be associated with a violation of either the Constitution or the Act on the National Bank of Poland by the current governor. Please be reminded that no citizen is held accountable for his or her statements, and this also applies to the governor of the NBP. What happened was that sometimes the governor would rather strongly comment on A, B, or C. Very often we heard that the governor said that as regards the government steps, they are effective or efficient or good. But can we say that the governor violated his political impartiality? No, he did not. For that time, this kind of action was adequate for the situation and relevant for the needs. So where is a particular deed? Ladies and gentlemen, Poland's history knows cases where one of the governors of NBP was trying to interfere with the composition of the cabinet. And there was a comment where one or other minister should step down. So what happened? Was that the case that a parliamentary majority formulated the postulate of removing the governor of the NBP? No. This would have been not in line with democratic standards and not in line with the Act on the National Bank of Poland that I mentioned earlier. Ladies and gentlemen, let me make another observation based on recent weeks and recent days. This information campaign that NBP has been running with regard to the situation that we have all witnessed is beginning to bring specific fruit. We can see that the society and the broad public have begun to understand that these allegations are completely groundless in legal terms. They are detached from elementary facts. So the public opinion and some politicians who formulated those allegations quite strongly before have started to reflect on the facts. They have started to read the legislation, which we strongly encourage, and anybody who reads relevant legislation must come to specific conclusions, namely that these kinds of actions would have been contrary to the law, would have been against European standards, and would have been against the financial interests of the Republic of Poland. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Deputy Governor, and thank you very much, members of board. And let me move to another comment. Today, the European Central Bank has published an important letter which is available on the website of the ECB, and it is addressed to the National Bank of Poland. So based on this, there can be some narrative that could be built, and ECB is an institution that gathers central banks within the European Union. Now we begin a question and answer session. Please be alerted that any questions related to aspects other than the situation that is the subject matter of the situation could be asked, but outside this room. So you will not leave with your questions unanswered, and I will be available to you to answer your questions together with Ms. Knightley and together with all other board members who have just spoken. We are available, and I will be available also after the conference and will answer all of the questions you might have. Let us begin with news agencies. Roman Tuszyński, PAP Economic Office. You have sent letters to ECB and the National, the World Bank, and are you planning to talk with political leaders about this launch of the procedure related to the Tribunal of State? Well, we have sent a letter to the Marshal, the Speaker of the Polish Parliament, and this is why we are meeting here today. He represents the parliamentary majority in a way, so the institutions that you have mentioned are indeed very important, but it is most important to communicate with the Parliament. This is why we ask Mr. Hołownia, the Marshal of the Polish Parliament, to communicate our letter to all members of the parliamentary majority, and this is another reason why we are organizing this conference, to make this communication very clear. Any questions? Radio Tok FM. Hello, Maciej Głogowski from Radio Tok FM. Can I ask one question or more questions? Let's begin with one. Because Mr. Sura, when you mentioned that this act on the Tribunal of State dates back to 1982, but you did not mention that the reflection is coming now, so maybe this view could have been mentioned earlier. And let me just probe on... yes, Mr. Głogowski, let's answer your question. There have been no cases. This was a question to my colleague, Professor Sura. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Głogowski. You have actually touched upon the essence of the problem, but I kind of answered this question already. There was no parliamentary majority in the past to have raised such allegations unfounded, without any legal foundation. So this has been a dead provision of law, so to speak, and nobody has thought that these kinds of provisions could be used as a foundation for formulating allegations. I hope this provision will be eliminated soon. Well, yes, thank you very much. I am not going to get into a discussion, but the argument that nobody has come up with this idea so far does not mean that, you know, somebody might it might occur to somebody to come up with this argument now. So this is not a good reason. And then you quoted Mr. Glapiński and said that nobody can be held accountable for statements, their statements. So I have a question related to Professor Glapiński's statement, because in your letter what you wrote was that vague allegations and have been formulated, and they are so vague that the only fault of Mr. Governor is that the coalition, or the potential new coalition, would see somebody else in his position. Well, why didn't you wait for any specific decisions or steps? So far, there have been no political decisions yet, but you are already replying to allegations in a quite selective way, by the way. And the procedure regarding the Tribunal of State is relevant for the same, not really for the National Assembly as a whole. And you have very concretely addressed some of the allegations, such as a purchase of bonds or fighting inflation, but you have not addressed the allegations regarding the politicization of the NBP. You have not mentioned that. You just mentioned some statements by Mr. Governor. So very quickly, to leave more time for other questions, would you say that the allegation of politicization is indeed vague? And would you accept such comments by the governor as the following? It is happening here and now. Knock down the government, take Poland to the Eurozone. And this has been the mission of Donald Tusk when he was being sent to Poland. So was Mr. Governor actually making these statements against some political formation or for a political formation, and should we accept the governor speaking in such politicized way? Let me answer this question. Some months ago, we had an announcement that the governor of the National Bank of Poland would be removed by force from his position by somebody who is most probably going to be the Prime Minister of Poland in a few days. And there has been no reflection on that, and these words were not taken back. And these conclusions or motions have been reiterated in the last weeks. And the question is, aren't we reacting too hastily? Well, we would like to present clear arguments and refer directly to the National Assembly, to Marshal Hołownia, to all of the members of the Sejm and the Senate, and to the broad public, stating that such allegations are groundless, not founded in facts or in the Constitution. So there might be a time of very rowdy, sometimes electoral rhetoric, but we need to wonder at some point whether to continue such actions in the future or not. Mr. Glapiński's comments are made in pursuance of the constitutional freedom of speech, and everybody in Poland enjoys that kind of freedom. And of course, considering the emotional context, there may have been a reaction or a defense to what our institution had faced and what he himself had faced over those 10 or so months. So I cannot see how these words could have crossed the line. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, are there any other questions? And please do your best to be brief. TVN, please go ahead.
Michał Gołębiowski, TVN24. You have referred to political allegations on grounds of actions against inflation and the purchase of treasury bonds. But how about allegations as regards the independence of the NBP that has been undermined, as well as human resource policy? Magdalena Bejra, Hojny-Duch, Żyżyński, and other names. We will discuss it later on. Okay, so how about this staffing policy and the independence of the National Bank of Poland? the independence of the National Bank of Poland, our deeds speak volumes. And the history is that representatives of different parties, prime ministers or decision makers and stakeholders who were taking decisions, they change, but our independence is reflected in our deeds as an independent, impartial institution. We're trying to understand this narrative that was voiced during the election campaign and during the election and following the parliamentary election. And I must say that this verbal attack against the decisions of the National Bank of Poland when the country was facing a rapid collapse and we had to squash inflation, stifle inflation. These were independent decisions and based on the best knowledge and information about what is going on in the economy. These were collective decisions and they were positive for the economy, and we survived both the pandemic and other difficulties, and we are witnessing approaching the inflation target, and the monetary policy guidelines emphasize that because inflation has this supply characteristic, it would be difficult to do it quickly. We have to somehow survive the pandemic and do not use very strong shocks. So independence has to be safeguarded. Okay, what if the next pandemic develops, or there is some economic slump, and then the management board the governors decide about taking such actions, and maybe they will refrain from doing anything because of the current situation. So we have to be independent, impartial, using our own experience and experience of other central banks, and we have to be capable of taking independent decisions. Dear editor, another journalist now. Let me reflect upon what Deputy Governor has mentioned. You emphasize the independence of the central bank in terms of decision making, but also independence from the influence. S&P ratings agency offers A- rating and slower decrease of inflation, but less respect and confidence in the monetary policy decisions. If the new coalition actually destroys our independence, then this risk is going to be materialized. Now, these personal issues about given surnames will be discussed later. For months, Mr. Samecki used to be the advisor to the governor. Mr. Samecki is well known to us. We know what was his affiliations in the politics. Hojna Duch was in the past the advisor to Prime Minister Tusk. So our governor is pluralistic in selecting experts, advisors, taking into account their knowledge, their experience, and at least these two examples prove that allegations of being politicized in this context, in the context of staffing, is speaking volumes of the knowledge of those who formulate such allegations. Yes. Yes, please. Ewa Wesołowska, Polish Press Agency. I'd like to ask a question about the possible consequences in the international world market, let's say, And from the point of view of the situation in the exchange market, so these allegations against the National Bank of Poland, what might be the consequences? Deputy Governor, over to you. Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, in many countries, central banks are being criticized, taking into account inflation and fighting inflation, but we know no other examples. Poland is the only example where the parliamentary majority is seriously thinking about suspending the operations of the governor of the National Bank of Poland. We received replies from the European Central Bank that the independence is protected under Article 14.2 of the Statute of the ESCB and the ECB. So also there is a possibility of filing a complaint to the Court of Justice of the European Union. This decision can be referred to the Court of Justice of the European Union. This would have been a precedent, and it might trigger certain consequences. Of course, we cannot say for sure. We are not looking at the glass ball, and it might have an impact on the rate of Polish currency and the value of Polish currency, of course, and inflation. And we are sure we are not going to witness such a situation. And we hope for normal everyday work. We hope not to be exposed to materials and news about our activities, undermining our activities and independence, and we hope for normal, routine operations. So in recent weeks, there has been no such stability, we must say, and this unprecedented words of people who are about to be stakeholders and decision makers at the state level, we advise to think twice and consider what makes sense. The NBP is not to make it impossible to be in the way of the policy of the government, of any government in the future. Yes, it is true that in accordance with the Act on the National Bank of Poland, we have been informing about our policy, about activities calmly, in a reasonable way. We want to cooperate with other institutions, and it is important for us to have a chance to do so. So it is important to stop this at this point. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your presence, Deputy Governor, members of the Management Board, thank you for participation, and please get acquainted with the reply of the European Central Bank, because there were opinions that the international institutions never reply to the letters, and here we have the reply from the European Central Bank, which is going to follow the situation and cooperate with the NBP on these matters. I'm always open to your questions every day, and also today after the press conference. Thank you. See you.